Hello, back at the microphone, back in Parliament. I wanted to start, just because we didn't have an opportunity to speak to it in the House. I'm keenly aware that colleagues and friends are home isolating with COVID-19. So I just want to send best wishes to Aaron O'Toole and his wife and family. This is a difficult time for them. Et aussi pour Yves-François Blanchette et sa femme. Mes sentiments sont avec vous, tous les deux couples avec COVID-19, et on doit rester isolé. So I'm well aware that it's a very unusual day for the speech from the throne when the official opposition leader and the third party in the House, the Bloc Québécois, are not able to even be in the room with us at 6-foot distancing and wearing a mask for having been diagnosed with COVID-19. So for the speech from the throne, on behalf of the Green Party of Canada, I'm joined by my extraordinary colleague, Paul Manley, Member of Parliament for Nanaimo Ladysmith. We were watching the speech from the throne and listening and thinking, boy, this sounds like a lot of the ideas we've had and keep pressing. So from my conversation with the Prime Minister before the speech from the throne, was maybe the ink was already dry, but I must have guessed well, because in our phone conversation of last week, a number of the things that I stressed are included here: the need to pursue pharmacare, the importance of high-quality childcare, the importance of international aid and development assistance. I think we may be the only party that was pushing those issues, as well, of course, as not ignoring the urgency of Indigenous reconciliation. A large number of issues that we raised, renewables, energy efficiencies, tree planting, are specifically raised here. But of course, our specific bottom line is always, is this good enough to actually preserve life at a quality of life we will accept for our own children? It's a very real thing that the climate crisis and the COVID crisis both require action at the same time. So I say my first reaction is to be relieved that there's as much discussion of climate as there is in here, but disappointed that key realities of Canada's commitments are only hinted at. The question for us as Greens is, are we happy with the hints? Pour nous, comme Verts, nous sommes un caucus de seulement 3 députés, mais le rôle de chef dans le Parlement, c'est moi-même, mais nous n'avons pas un système exiger aux membres d'équipe de faire les mêmes choses que notre chef. Ce n'est pas notre façon de travail. Nous sommes un caucus et une partie avec les valeurs pour trouver les décisions par consensus. So we work by consensus. We've had a brief conversation with our colleague, Jenica Atwin, who watched the speech from the throne from her riding in Fredericton, and we will continue to work through our reaction to it. Initial reaction was to be pleased with a lot of the things we saw. Things for people with disabilities, critical. Programs for retraining workers, very important. There was a lot here that we were happy to see, and I have to say we're tempered in what we're happy to see by knowing we've seen it before. So I don't know the statute of limitations on continuing to promise that we're going to get drinking water to Indigenous communities. There is a commitment here that I was happy to see for legislating the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Critical. Critical to see a commitment to take action based on the report of the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And at long last, to talk again about the importance of implementing the calls for action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There's a lot here that we're pleased to see, but we need to know exactly when we can take it to the bank. But to change gears a little, I want to pass the mic to Paul Manley. Paul Manley va prendre la parole pour parler un peu des programmes dans le domaine de justice sociale.
Well, thank you. Yes, we've seen a number of these things before in the document, and specifically the Green Party platform in 2015 and 2019, and our document about reimagining the future, which we presented to the government this spring. So there's a lot of things in here that we're happy to see. We really need something more concrete, though, in terms of making sure that we take care of vulnerable people in this community, in this country, with guaranteed livable income to ensure that we are resilient and prepared for the other challenges that we face, whether that's automation, whether that's artificial intelligence that's taking away people's jobs, whether it's the climate crisis where we're going to see people dislocated from their communities, and ensuring that we have a robust social safety net to take care of people. We don't see that in this document yet. I was happy to see things like community policing for First Nations in here. This is something that I'm very familiar with because my sister is Indigenous and worked as a police officer in remote communities, and I know this is something that First Nations in my community, in my riding, have been asking for, is a different model of policing, and we've seen good models like that at Quanlan Dun in the Yukon, the Anishinaabe Aski police force in Northern Ontario, and this is a really important step to be taking to ensure that policing in Indigenous communities is respectful of the community and works with the community. I would have liked to have seen some action on salmon. The Cohen report is, the deadline is coming up. We are seeing a crash in Pacific salmon right now. This is important for Indigenous people. It's important for our economy. We need to see specific actions on Pacific salmon. I'm glad to see that there's help for seniors. We've been calling for a national action plan for seniors. We want to see long-term care facilities. We'd like to see some proper regulation to protect seniors in long-term care facilities and to protect the workers that are caring for them. And people with disabilities. The most vulnerable people in our country are the ones that are most affected by the COVID-19 crisis. They are the ones that are most affected by climate change and other shifts to our economy. Marginalized people, low-wage workers, visible minorities, newcomers to this country. And programs like a guaranteed livable income would ensure that there is a floor under which no Canadian could fall in terms of their income. So those are really important things. We're looking to see, in the legislation that's coming, we want to see protection for people who are sick. So if people need sick leave, that they get sick leave. We're, as Elizabeth has said, we're happy to see universal pharmacare is going to be stepping forward, but we'd like to see a stronger commitment to that. We need to take care of people. And of course, climate change. We're happy to see that the government is looking at the resource base that we have and the skills base that we have in this country and how we can use the skills and resources in our manufacturing base to become a leader in developing technologies and working towards dealing with the climate crisis and ensuring that we decarbonize our economy. So you have anything to add, or we'll just take the questions from there?
I think there's a great deal in here that one can breeze through. I think the common denominator here, one thing that strikes me is comparing it to December 5th, 2019. A lot of the same commitments are being made around seeing carbon neutrality by 2050, but without specific targets. We're seeing, I think, more positive language here. There's no discussion in this speech from the throne that we must get our resources to market. That's an improvement. But we're not seeing anything like the kind of commitment that in calendar year 2020, we must improve our targets. It's not something that can be put off till next year because these targets aren't political. They are scientific. And we can't negotiate with the DNA of the COVID-19 virus any more than we can negotiate with atmospheric chemistry and physics. The science behind both of these threats doesn't move. It's quite unforgiving. And we have to anticipate and get ahead of the climate crisis curve as quickly as humanly possible. We hope that's the direction that they're hinting at in this speech from the throne. And we are ready. Nous sommes disponibles pour les questions en anglais et en français.
We'll now take questions, starting with questions on the phone. Nous allons maintenant prendre des questions, en commençant par des questions au téléphone. Un petit rappel, quick question, one question, one follow-up. Une question de suivi. Operator, do we have a first question?
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. Veuillez appuyer sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. There are no questions registered at this time. I'd like to turn the meeting back over to you.
Perfect. We'll take some questions from the room. Nous allons prendre des questions dans la salle. Ashley?
Good afternoon, Ms. May. Ashley Burke, CBC News. Why was the Green Party leadership candidate Mariam Haddad suspended from the leadership race?
What was your question?
Why was the Green Party leadership candidate Mariam Haddad suspended from the leaadleadership race?
That's a process that has not concluded yet. I am not on the committee that made an initial determination. I don't know the reasons for the vetting committee making that determination. But the Leadership Contest Committee, again, we have arm's length committees. I'm not engaged with any of it. So I have to tell you that I don't know, and I'm not certain that that's the correct premise. She may well be on the ballot. I don't know.
And why did you retweet a social media post that called her to resign and accused her of stabbing the party in the back?
I actually accidentally retweeted something that I shouldn't have retweeted, and I posted immediately, as you know, on Twitter. The first part of that tweet was, don't treat provincial cousins this way. We must all support the BC Green Party. I so strongly support the BC Green Party. Leader Sonia Furstenau is extraordinary. She's very talented, she's brilliant, and she's courageous. And it wasn't well timed on the opening day of the BC election for someone running for federal leadership to actually make massive errors of fact in attacking provincial cousins. I was making a statement about the BC Green Party and my unequivocal, and the Green Party of Canada's unequivocal support for Sonia Furstenau, Adam Olsen, and all the candidates running, Nicholas Burling, all the candidates running in the BC provincial election. And you know how Twitter is. People have blown it up as if I was actually criticizing Mariam. I wasn't. And I posted that immediately afterwards in my only standalone tweet on the matter, which was to say, I'm not commenting on leadership candidates. I take no position on leadership candidates. I am saying that we in the Green Party of Canada fully support the BC Green Party in this provincial election.
Mackenzie?
Hi, Ms. May. Mackenzie Ray with CTV News. You said that there's many things in the throne speech that you like, but you'd like more concrete action. I mean, You've been around Parliament a long time. You know that the throne speech is a kind of aspirational document more so than a piece of legislation. So it really does sound like that your party is going to support this. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, not until Jenica, Paul, and I actually sit down and discuss it together and see how we all three of us feel about it. I'd say our first reaction was quite positive, but I know we were disappointed because there were a lot of trial balloons out there about moving to guaranteed livable income. So not finding guaranteed livable income, even as an aspirational goal, is very disappointing. But we will continue to work through it as a team and see where we all land. And of course, we all don't have to vote the same way, but we try to reach a decision by consensus and decide how we're going to vote together.
I know that the Green Party can't tip the balance of power in this situation or potentially trigger an election or not.
Well, if a whole bunch of MPs on their way to Parliament fell down and something heavy landed on them, at that point, we could be absolutely critical to the survival of this government. But you're right.
Well, barring that scenario, as I said earlier, you've been around Parliament a long time, and we've seen all the different leaders come through, and we've heard from the Prime Minister saying, we don't want an election, nobody wants an election right now, but we're at a situation where an election is a distinct possibility in this situation if the opposition parties don't vote with the Liberal government. Do you think it is a responsible thing at this point in time during a pandemic to have a federal election?
Well, let me just back up and say that given, and I was responding to a question earlier today about whether Justin Trudeau is organizing this, setting the table to have an election. And I said if there was a poison pill in this speech that I could see that the Bloc couldn't possibly vote for it and Jagmeet Singh couldn't possibly vote for it. I mean, obviously the Conservatives are having hissy fits, but it looks to me like there's nothing in here that is designed to prompt an election. So just to set that aside, I also know from Dominic LeBlanc, who's the minister responsible for democratic institutions, we've been talking about it since June, that the chief electoral officer is working on amendments to the Elections Act to ensure that if we are in an election in a pandemic, the Elections Act is ready. So I believe quite firmly that it would be vastly irresponsible to trigger an election when the Elections Act is not COVID ready. Blaine Higgs took a chance, right? Blaine Higgs decided in New Brunswick that he was going to throw the dice, and he was rewarded for it. But the New Brunswick COVID rate is one of the lowest in the country. British Columbia's is 6 times higher. To have a federal election where the Elections Act requires election workers to show up in certain roles that are absolutely statutory requirements would be very irresponsible to the workers and to the voters.
Bonjour, mon ami, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Est-ce que vous allez voter en faveur du discours du trône, oui ou non?
À ce moment, actuellement, nous sommes dans le processus de décider parce que comme Vert, comme toi, député Vert, nous travaillons ensemble comme une équipe. Pour nous, c'est absolument essentiel de trouver une décision ensemble par consensus. Comme chef dans la Chambre des communes de notre petit caucus, ce n'est pas à moi de décider. Je pense que c'est clair que pour notre impression préliminaire, nous sommes positifs. Mais en même temps, notre collègue, la députée de Fredericton, Jenica Atwin, nous avons eu un petit appel de parler après le discours du trône et nous avons demandé de rester neutre au sujet de notre vote parce qu'elle a les questions. Pour tout le monde, on doit étudier le discours du trône et réfléchir.
Juste pour reprendre la question de mon collègue en anglais, est-ce que vous pensez que c'est raisonnable d'aller en élection fédérale cet automne?
Pour moi, je pense que non. Parce que nous avons la loi sur l'élection qui c'est obligatoire sur notre loi des élections d'avoir les travailleurs d'Élection Canada, puis aussi les électeurs dans les situations qui ne sont pas sécuritaires dans une pandémie. Je connais bien que le commissaire des élections Canada a travaillé fort pendant tout l'été de préparer les amendements de notre loi sur les élections pour changer les lois pour le but d'avoir une loi qui marche dans une pandémie. Et je pense que c'est vraiment irresponsable de pousser pour une élection avec notre loi actuelle, particulièrement quand je suis certain que dans quelques mois seulement, peut-être quelques semaines, avec un niveau d'effort tous les partis dans notre Chambre de communes, de changer la loi sur l'élection, d'avoir une loi qui marche dans une pandémie. Pour ça, je pense qu'il sera irresponsable d'imaginer une élection fédérale avec les niveaux de COVID qui maintenant ont augmenté encore. Et pour les citoyens de Canada, les électeurs et du Québec, je suis certain que tout le monde a leur inquiétude. Merci.
Nous allons maintenant vérifier s'il nous reste une question au téléphone. Do we have one more question on the phone?
Do you want to
As a reminder, please press star 1.
Do you want to
Veuillez appuyer sur l'étoile pour poser une question. Nous n'avons toujours pas de questions. There are no questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Again, I didn't acknowledge it when I started, so let me acknowledge in finishing. We're on the territory of the Algonquin Nation. Miigwech.
This concludes the press conference. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Merci.